right, hello guys. I'm sorry I was a little bit behind with the video here. I was sick um, and got a little bit behind, but now I am back on track. So we're gonna go ahead and get this one and last week's Sunday school lesson on the site for you. So this first one is called Lessons from a Wise Man, Part 1 of Things You've Read in the Nativity Story but Overlooked. I think this is very important. We tend to read the Christmas story and we breeze through it because we're so familiar with it, but there's some details in the wording that if you really look at it, is quite interesting. So let's look at the first one. If we start in Matthew 2, you'll see, now, after Jesus was born in Bethlehem of Judea in the day of King Herod, behold, wise men from the east came to Jerusalem, saying, where is he who has been born of the King of the Jews? For we have seen a star in the east and have come to worship him. When Herod the king heard this, he was troubled, and all Jerusalem with him. And when he had gathered all the chief priests and scribes of the people together, he inquired of them where the Christ was to be born. So they told him, in Bethlehem of Judea, for thus it is written by the prophet. But you, Bethlehem, in the land of Judah, are not the least among the rulers of Judah, for out of you shall come a ruler who will shepherd my people Israel. Then Herod, when he had secretly called the wise men, determined from them when the star appeared. And he sent them to Bethlehem and said, go and search carefully for the young child, and when you have found him, bring him back word to me, that I may come and worship him also. When they heard the king, they departed, and behold, the star which they had seen in the east went before them, till it came and stood over where the young Christ was. When they saw the star, they rejoiced with exceedingly great joy. And when they had come into the house, they saw the young child with Mary, his mother, and fell down and worshipped him. And when they opened their treasures, they presented gifts for him, gold, frankincense, and myrrh. Then, being divinely warned in a dream that they should not return to Herod, they departed from their own country another way. Now we're going to jump over to verse 16, and it says, then King Herod, when he saw that he was deceived by the wise men, was exceedingly angry, and he sent forth and put to death all the male children who were in Bethlehem and in all its districts, from 2 years old and under, according to the time which he had determined from the wise men. So, what did we miss in reading this first part of the story with the wise men? Because quite often, there are few things which we overlook, combined with the Hollywood presentations of the Nativity in the Bible and stuff like that. Not saying those are wrong, but a lot of the times they go and they fictionalize and they get that Hollywood flair to it. So we need to look at it. What three things, four things are we going to focus on this time? Well, first we need to look uh, the time period of what was going on in Jesus' life. And then the second thing we're going to look at is not only was King Herod upset, but all Jerusalem was upset. Why is this? The third is that Jesus was two when the wise men saw them, not the picturesque nativity scene where the wise men are there at the manger. And then fourth, we're going to look at that the gifts that were given by the wise men took care of Jesus' entire life. So let's jump into that first point. The point one is birthing lasting hatred. See, we read about the time of King Herod, and we typically send a breeze over that. Oh, it's the time of King Herod. But have we ever looked at what was going on in that time? See, first, if we look at the time, there are some very significant things going on in the time of King Herod. First, it's good to know who this King Herod is. Well, King Herod was the son of, and if I pronounce this wrong, I'm sorry, Idumean. Okay? And that is said that he ruled about 37 to 4 BC. Now, that's not very interesting. What is interesting is that Herod was an Edomite. Now, if you know a little bit of your Old Testament here, the Edomites and the Israelites were always against each other because of the whole Jacob and Esau thing. Now, the prophecy, okay, that's found in Genesis 25 and 23 says that there's two within the womb, and the younger will be over the older. The younger being Isaac, and the older being Esau. Now, if you trace Jesus's lineage, sorry, had a slur there, Jesus's lineage, then you'll see that he was actually from Isaac's side. Herod is from Esau's side. Interesting enough, if you look at the Edomites, most of the evil people that we would consider evil people in the world, including Nazis and stuff like that, branch off of Edomites against God's people throughout history. It's very interesting. Look it up. Now, going back to the Jacob and Esau, if you read Isaiah 11:1, which, if you remember from our previous studies on the 7 characteristics of God, we read this a lot. A shoot will come up from the stump of Jesse, his roots, a branch will bear fruit. Talking about Jesus here. So, in literal terms, Herod was like the older of Jesus because he was born first, but also because he was an Edomite. Jesus was the younger from Mary, but really, who was stronger, who did more? Jesus. Now, continuing on with this, uh, we'll see that during Herod's time, Herod was in charge of a bunch of building projects in Jerusalem. He was friends with Octavius, who later became Augustus Caesar. This is the Caesar that was referenced while Jesus was living. Now, keep in mind also that the Edomites knew the prophecy and they were always against him. This is a blood feud. So if he knows the prophecy and if he knew Jesus was from that other line, he might have seen it as Jesus being a physical ruler like the Jews, because Herod was Jewish, uh, that he was going to rise up and take power from him. So again, it's that power struggle, that's blood feud. The not that Jesus was in a blood feud, but Herod was in a blood feud between the two families. And so again, it's a whole thing about the power. Now, the Augustus Caesar, different Caesar. Now, the second point is that it was not just Herod that was upset. It says all of Jerusalem was upset. Why? Well, let's look at a couple of things. First, people fear the unknown. Jerusalem is a Jewish city, which means they knew the prophecy. They were under the same mindset as the Pharisees and the Sadducees, primarily because this was the only religious institution of that time. It was the so-called church at that time. We don't want to think of it that way, but it was. The Pharisees and Sadducees controlled the church. So, while the Bible doesn't specifically say why they were upset, and all we can really do is speculate, there is some reasoning that we can apply to this. First, there were various signs which would occur. This is all throughout the Old Testament, these signs and prophecies. Uh, they knew what these signs were. This is the same thing that's happening now with people that have studied the Bible. They understand the signs of Jesus' return, and they were afraid of the unknown. While we are looking forward to Jesus' return, and some people are scared about that, they were looking for the first coming of Jesus, and he's going to be a king that's going to overthrow things. Now, since the signs issued in the reign of a new king, they thought that it was a physical new reign. And so they would be scared of King Herod and his reprisal and his anger upon the people. Remember, they're thinking that this is a physical king that's going to overthrow the previous king. Historically speaking, that means that they thought Jesus was going to come in, kill King Herod and his entire family, because that's how overthrowing a king occurred back then. So it's quite realistic to believe that Jerusalem was a little bit scared of the murderous nature of King Herod, because again, think of how they overthrew kings back in that time. Now, there's another point, but let's look at this. Now, on the days, a decree went out from Caesar Augustus that a census should be taken of the inhabited earth. Okay, so If you go and you look at non-biblical texts, you'll see Herod was known for his high taxes. The census was not about really bringing people together, but Herod was getting old in his age, and he had many sons, and the sons wanted to know the state of the kingdom. They wanted to tax the people to kind of tie up loose ends and stuff like that. Now, again, if you look at the time period, you'll think, well, if I have a family of 9, 10, 12 people, and I have to eat and survive, I'm not going to sit there and say that every last one of them is a man of rightful age and can pay taxes. Just like nowadays, some people don't file for certain things uh, because they don't want to pay the government. I'm not advocating that in any means. I'm just saying that it happens. So that could be another issue why the whole Jerusalem was fearful because, hey, when they come in and they start looking for the kids and they start looking at the households, they see non-compliance issues. Herod is the king. They don't look very kindly upon people that don't do what the state says. So that could be another reason. So it's also important to note that King Herod, even though they call him a king, he was not technically king. He was never actually crowned or dubbed king historically. The the person he answered to was the Roman emperor. And this again goes into the whole Pharisees, Sadducees thing, where they were scared of the Roman Empire coming in and taking over. So again, go back and think about the overthrowing of the king. Go and think about the taxes. Go and think about, they know that there's going to be a physical king in their eyes that is going to overthrow this. That's going to involve the Roman Empire. That's going to involve in more government control, and it's going to oppress the Jewish people. So that is why the Jewish people were fearful. Now, the third point is that Jesus was not a baby when the wise men found him. So sometimes you have to seek God for a time to find him. It says when the wise men came to Jesus, he was about 2 years of age. The wise men went to a house. They didn't go to the manger, they went to a house. Now, there are a few things to note here. First, the wise men were dedicated to the task of finding their Savior, the King. It was likely, and biblical scholars agree, that the wise men were from the east and that it took them 2 years to get from the east on that journey. There's a couple reasons for this. Trade routes to China would give that time period. Also, they said that they saw the star and they've been following it. If it was something close by, it would not have lined up. There's also a very interesting thing that kind of ties in is that China has three symbolic figures that are called the wise men. Now, I find it interesting that they have three and that their deities, uh, which some say came about in the same time. I don't have documented proof for that, but it's interesting. The three wise men of China are Fuke, Luke, and Su. And you have good luck and harmony, power and wealth, and longevity. Now, let's think about this. They bring three gifts. They bring gold, frankincense, and myrrh. Okay, gold being power and wealth, frankincense being for good health and longevity. There's lots of things that does, and myrrh. I think I might have gotten this backwards between the frankincense and myrrh, but that was for burial. That was for kings. That was for stuff like that. So now, if you read the story and you really go into it, you'll see that there's one no definitive proof of the nationality of the wise men, and there's also no definitive number of the wise men. It could have been two, it could have been three, it could have been 100, it could have been 1,000. We just say that it's three because there's three gifts. So the next thing to notice is that If they went to the house of Jesus, that means that Mary and Joseph had to have set down roots. Uh, they had gone into Bethlehem. They had gotten into the culture and stuff like that. Now, why is that? Well, let's think about it. If Mary had gone back to her family and to her community, she had an illegitimate child. Joseph was supporting an illegitimate child. And even though it was the Son of God and worldly standards, let's think about this. If somebody came to you and said, "Hey, I just had a baby from God," and you really didn't know for sure, you would look at them a little bit weird. People would gossip. They would have been ostracized from the community. So the ministry of Jesus would be greatly stifled by that. Joseph, in his discernment, took him out of that environment and gave Mary and baby Jesus, to 2-year-old Jesus, a new start so that he could bring him up properly. Now, the fourth point is the gifts that encompassed Jesus' entire ministry. Now, let's look at this. This is very, very interesting. When we look at the three gifts, we can tend to just go boop and just go over it. Oh, okay, they gave the three gifts. But there's very interesting things. First, the gold that he gave them. Okay. In the Bible, we see that Jesus has a ministry. Ask any minister out there, and they're going to tell you that ministering is something that costs money. Well, I'm sure that people donated throughout the 3 years to God's ministry, Jesus' ministry. It's also very plausible that the gold uh, that he got from birth was used to fund some of that and to take care of his family and such things like that. Frankincense, if you look frankincense up, has tons and tons and tons and tons and tons of medical things that helps, particularly for muscles, cramps in the legs, headaches, as a ointment to the skin to keep it from getting sunburn and such. All in all, Jesus had a first aid kit with the frankincense. And of course, the myrrh was used as an herb for the dead. So, taking all things into consideration, gold for the ministry, frankincense to take care of Jesus while he's out and about doing things, even though he can heal himself. I'm sure he used uh, the frankincense and other medicine to help every so often as well. And the myrrh, of course, went at the crucifixion when he died and rose from the dead. So, what can we learn from the wise men? First, we have learned that man does not understand the workings of God. If we've overlooked it, we don't understand it all. Next, we know that God must be sought while he can be found, because the wise men looked for him for 2 years. That sometimes it takes a while to get to Jesus, gets to God. Jeremiah 29:13. I'm giving you some scriptures to look at this. Okay? That those who are not generally considered to be men of God, the wise men were considered to be astronomers, can have an impact on the overall purpose and ministry of Jesus. Revelation 22:17. And that our perceptions about the Bible are apt to be misunderstandings that we have read and not known for years, and that we can still have things that God reveals to us. And that's 1 Corinthians 13:9 through 12.